Oh my goodness, another one in the series. One of my favorite things to do, as many of you know, I've done these before with many friends and many clients over the years, is modeling. Modeling means the duplication of success. In 25 years of business coaching, speaking, I get people that are right in my friendship group, right in my client group that are willing to talk. So I want to say thank you to Jeremy first. I'm going to bring him in and talk about a lot of different things. Him and I have known each other for a bit, and I'll let him tell a little bit of that story as well. And we're going to get into some of our passions, the nonprofit world, the psychology of motivation behind nonprofit, how he started his company, Amphil, who I've been working with the last couple of years. So first of all, I want to say, Jeremy, thanks for coming on.
It is my pleasure, Mike. Don't ask me too many hard questions if you don't mind.
By the way, we didn't do any planning on this. That's one thing
There
that you and I
are no
agreed to.
scripts. There
Yeah,
are
I
no
love
scripts.
that. When
Yeah.
we do casts, there's no scripts. It's just pure authenticity. So that's what you're going to get. If you see me looking down, these are my journal notes. It's hard when you know somebody personally
Yeah.
to not get too deep in the weeds and get to the bigger points. So let me tell you my quick version. So it was we're coming up on our second year. Coming up on our second year. Jeremy Beer, we and I mutual friends here in Phoenix, Arizona, and he had reached out to me, obviously in an executive coaching capacity, consultative capacity, and a friendship capacity. We have a really good friend who loves us both dearly in separate ways. And I said, hey, why don't you do me a favor? Come down to my office and let's spend some time together. So we spent some time right here in this office and just talked about life, talked about business, talked about being a leader. And I don't know about you, man. I'll tell you, you can tell your version, but in my mind, in about a half hour, I felt like I just connected with you. I felt like I understood you a little bit. And I could see that if there was this quote next level that I always talk about in my work, I could see it in you, but I just didn't know what it would be. So I appreciate the chance to work with you one on one, and now with your company, Amphil, which we'll hear about in a little bit. But that's my version. I'm not sure why
Yeah.
you reached out in the first
No,
place.
that's a reasonably accurate version. I think I recognize your version in the version that I would remember myself, Mike. So
Yeah.
I won't challenge your version. I think I'm going to go with that. That's
All
good.
right. So I can come up with different titles: entrepreneur, husband, philanthropist, author, podcaster. I can go on and on about the names that I call you behind your back when it comes to your monikers. But to me today, it's just a friend talking to another friend about life and business, and just talking about the things that we're passionate about and the things that you have put so much time into work, not only in your business, Amphil, but your work as writers. Both of us are writers, and I can't wait to talk to a fellow co-author about the passions of writing. So before we get started, you got to take us way back. You know, every deal, you're a writer, the story. Tell us your story and your version. As far back as you want to go, birth, when you grew up, and bring us a little bit to current on the personal life before we get into the business stuff.
So I won't go all the way back to birth. I think we might test people's patience quite a bit if we did that, but I will. I'll say I grew up in Indiana, rural northern Indiana, a little outside of a little town called Milford, and went to Indiana University, and was on the Slacker 5-year plan. That was a pretty popular plan back in the '90s. If
Big
you
time.
remember that was a good time.
Oh yeah.
I like the '90s. I went on to graduate school at the University of Texas at Austin to do a doctorate in psychology. Didn't actually really care that much for psychology, and certainly didn't try too hard to get a job in academia, which is what I was planning to do, become a professor. I ended up going to work for a nonprofit organization called the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, and met my wife there. She wasn't my wife yet. She became my wife later, and got to know and understand the world of nonprofits, which is something I was completely unfamiliar with. It was a great education in the sector. Was there for 8 or 9 years. Worked my way up to the C-suite by the end, and it was just a great education for somebody like me who had no business experience really, or no experience doing anything particularly valuable other than research in the discipline of psychology, to learn about how the world works, how organizations work, how they don't work, and I guess I'll tell this part of the story here, Mike. I'm not sure if I should yet, but I just in terms of where I went from there. Met Mike, the man who had become the co-founder of Amphil, was there at the time too. Another refugee from academia, a guy named Jeff Kane, a great guy. He had worked his way up to be the executive vice president there at ISI and had really learned the fundraising ropes deeply. And we both had needed to get back to where our wives were from, in his case, where he was from as well, to get rooted in our lives. So um, we thought we might do something together, that we would work well together. And we had both, we'd seen a lot of consultants come through ISI, kind of charging a lot of money to not do much work was sort of our take on it. And we thought there was a business opportunity here, potentially to provide services around fundraising in particular to nonprofit organizations, ones we really liked and believed in and thought were important for the good of the country or their communities, and that we could compete in that space. And so that's what we did. So there's the origin story in a nutshell, Mike, for Anvil.
I love it. Well, so let's go back a little bit, because I know I had something similar in my life where I thought I was going to go one way, then I went another way. I went to college at UC San Diego, went to law school, and I thought I was going to be a sports agent. And I went and interned with a sports agent, realized how it was unregulated, kind of a shwarmy business. And I realized it's not really where I want to go.
I want to hear more about that story.
That's over a bourbon, man. That's and a cigar. That's different. But I imagine, and I read the book too. So when we get to the book, somebody, an influencer, I believe a professor, had asked you something similar, like, what are you going to do when you grow up? What are you going to do after college? And you had intimations to doing this. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I thought I was going to go to law school too. I kept trying to put off real life because I had no idea at all what I wanted to do. I had no particular ambitions at that time. Like I said, it was the 90s. I think it had something to do with it being the 90s and me being a young male, idiot. So yeah, I was going to go to law school, but I didn't know how I was going to pay to go to law school. One of the things that channeling me towards graduate school at the beginning was this professor who was in the psychology department at IU and telling me that they pay you to go to graduate school. Like, you get a teaching assistantship, and it's like $1,200 a month. So a princely sum. I could not believe it. And tuition is waived. Yeah. That's $1,200 free a month, Mike, just for being a teaching assistant. So that is really what drove me down. I was like, okay, because I don't know how else I'm going to do anything. But that got me doing that got me serious. Okay, now I have a goal. So I started doing research with another professor in the department to kind of burnish my CV. And I was like, this is really fun. This is really fun. It's the first thing I really, really liked about school was doing research, creating, discovering knowledge, whatever the right verb is there, was really attractive to me. And I loved that all throughout graduate school as well. I had a really, really good time and a great experience at the University of Texas. Despite not going into the discipline later, that kind of work, researching and framing up theories that account for the world in better ways than previous theories that might account for the world, like that's what I find to be really gratifying.
I mean, how often do you see in the nonprofit world, that, because you're in that space obviously now, fast forward from when you built the business in 2009, that people that had a passion from the beginning, like, I'm going to college to go into nonprofit.
Yeah.
It's not something that people typically say that's the direct path. They meander their way through, probably like you and I did early in life, and say, well, I ended up in this spot. But in 2009, when you guys built the business, and not to mention, you see these consultants coming through thinking, okay, they don't really get it, and we're paying these people a lot of money. We think we could do it better. Tell us about that original, that year, that 2008, 2009, 10, when you built the company with you and your partners.
Yeah. Well, we had no idea what we were doing, number one. But we were charging so little, it didn't matter that much. We said we were putting ourselves through graduate school. That's how we looked at it. And basically, we had only the fuzziest of theses as to what our business was. We thought it was helping nonprofits around fundraising, which is what it actually still continues to be today. But we didn't really know what that would look like once you got below that headline. So we kind of just said yes to anything people asked us to do, if they would pay us any amount of money at all. And people, I remember one of our first clients, I don't know if they suggested or if we suggested that they needed a strategic plan. And they said, great, do that. how much, and I think we said $3,000, for like 90 days of work.
Wow.
But we didn't know what we were doing, so that was completely fair. We checked out. We didn't even buy books. We checked out books on strategic planning from a university library and read them. We're like, okay, this isn't that hard. And you Google around online, you find things, and that was our first strategic plan. So we really were in a fake it till you make it mode.
Mhm.
We were in putting ourselves through graduate school mode, and we were in the mode of like, what does the market want? What are people's perceived needs? What are their actual needs? How can we help meet those needs? Is there a way to make money at this? Over the long term, is there value here? Do we have a real value prop? Basically, probably not words we would have used at the time, but our goal was to pay our mortgages. That we had no. I know you're supposed to say that you had a grand vision for the beginning of your company, and it was going to be all. And we had no grand vision. We had no grand vision at all. Our vision was not getting foreclosed on
Yeah.
in the houses we had bought, in the places we now lived. So, but it worked. It worked out well enough, unbeknownst to us. The nonprofit sector at that time in particular, there was very little higher level consulting professional services kind of being offered. It's a pretty much kind of greenfield. It wasn't really competitive. And it particularly wasn't competitive in the part of the nonprofit sector that we really knew, where we had connections that we were really aiming at. So we got lucky. It happened to be a really good time to start a business, and a couple of knuckleheads could figure it out for a while until they got traction.
I don't know too many founders or CEOs in my years that had a grand vision that played true to form. It's just, as
Yeah,
you know, I mean, you have a passion and your heart, and you're solving a problem. I mean, that's really
yeah,
what it is, right? When you take your heart space and apply it towards your solving the wound of the end client at the end of the day, you figure out how that's going to go. And I imagine that's how it was. So you're normal, by the way, by not having a grand vision. That's pretty
okay.
normal when I do these interviews.
I'm glad to hear that.
All right, so tell us a little bit about, like, I always like asking founders. You had that one client. We don't need to know the name. I'll respect confidentiality, but you had that one moment you were like, holy moly, like we just landed this deal.
Hmm.
This is a game changer. This is a lot of money, bigger than what
Yeah,
we're used to. This is not 3,000 for 90 days work. What
right.
was that thing that you can share with us, with you and your partners? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, that's a great question. By the way, that's not part of our standard company narrative. So I actually had to think about this one. It was Jeff sat next to somebody at an event, a dinner in DC, um, which that is part of the company narrative. Always telling people, our staff and our colleagues, like how important it is to be just get out there, go to things. Number one rule: just go to things, meet people. Um, and he met this woman, sat next to her, and found out that she was running a nonprofit organization that did almost all of its fundraising solely through direct mail, and she was interested in uh, going beyond that and building out a more robust fundraising program. And they hit it off, and we landed that deal. And that was our first real deal. Uh, Still not very real by like today's standards, but it was like, oh wow, this is great. It wasn't somebody we had known before. It wasn't friends throwing us bones.
Yeah.
It was kind of, how this was going to work as we went forward. So, yeah, and that engagement lasted several years. So, and it really was what allowed us to put a little bit of money in the bank, um, and kind of get things rolling in a positive way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
that engagement was full of challenges. I remember she called me one year on that year on New Year's Eve, like I don't want to say like 7 or 8 p.m. Certainly her time, if not my time in Arizona. And I remember thinking, I don't like this at all. I hope it's not just like this all the way. New Year's Eve phone calls, but um, those things work themselves out.
Yeah, I think all founders remember that one story. I remember mine was just like a big deal, and the answer after I got it, they asked me all these questions I didn't have the answer to authentically. But I'm like, I'll figure it out. I mean,
Yeah,
I will pay people to coach me to figure this out.
exactly.
I'm going to land this deal somehow, some way. So we figure it out.
Yeah.
All right. So take us through a little bit in your version of the the company. So you start that, you're on your way, you get the clients, and then bring us a little bit of current. I know that's kind of like the elevator pitch of what's happened since 2009 to now, because now you're not in that position of still, you're always going to be a founder, but you now have relinquished your role to somebody else that you can talk
Yeah.
to in a minute. But tell us a little bit about that. What's happened, the good, bad, and the indifferent, what's happened to get to this point with the company?
Well, it certainly pretty early on, after a couple of years, it started taking off beyond everything we ever thought it might, to the point where we're hiring people. Um, first one or two, and then you have seven, then you have 10, and we, um, with only maybe 1 or 2 years of kind of semi flatness, experienced really rapid growth almost over the entire time of the company. Really hit a hockey stick, the handle of the hockey stick period. Uh, Around COVID, frankly, the kind of just before and after COVID, um, and is and it brought us to where we are now. And obviously I'm compressing. There's a lot in that story about
Yeah.
figuring out what we're doing and how we're structuring things. Although for years we've maintained, I guess I still maintain. Usually when people ask me, I don't really know what I'm doing. We are still figuring it out as we go. But we certainly have a better sense of how to go about things now, what our market is, how we best serve clients, how we don't serve them very well, so we don't want to do that stuff anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and it's so today we've stayed very true to the original sort of direction of the company, in the sense of 90+% of our work is helping nonprofits grow and strengthening their fundraising programs in various ways. The one thing we do is help you achieve your mission. That's around fundraising, and that it ramifies into a number of different services. We do work with donors as well, both foundations and family offices, individuals. That's a smaller part of our work. And yeah, 100-ish, maybe a little more than that, full-time employees across the country. We were always virtual because we couldn't afford talent if we had to force the talent to live where we wanted talent to live. We could only afford it if the deal was, but you get to live wherever you want to live. And so we were set up like that, fortunately, well before COVID forced everybody else to sort of learn that lesson. So we're scattered around the country, but we do have brick and mortar offices in Philly area, Chicago, Phoenix, Denver, and two boarding offices in Atlanta and Dallas. And I think that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
I think I could stop there.
So I know anybody could go to Amphil and see the website and see
Yeah.
the testimonials and the things we have to do, the braggadocio that you and I hate. I know you and I talk offline. Like one thing you and I both agree on that we hate about social media. Check me out, right?
Yeah.
The humble brag. I'm not a fan of that. I
Yeah.
have to be out there pushing myself, but my every post I ever do, whether it's a link or a document, am I bringing value to the individual that's going to read it? It has to do with the individual receiving it, contributing to them, rather than it's about me winning some award or being on some stage. I've evolved from that. I know probably in my 20s and 30s, I may be a little different. So if any of you see my YouTube stuff, just go ahead and fast forward to being 52 this week. I'll be 52, bro.
Oh,
So
congrats.
yeah, so that, but
Happy
you see
birthday.
my point. But these are things that people can see on the internet. People can Google you. People can go on the website. But this is where you and I get to get real with each other. Who are some of the clients that you can talk about, whether individual or firms, that you are proud about? You're like, hey, we worked really hard to organize with this company or to get this client, and these are
Yeah.
ones that are obviously public that you can talk about, just
Yeah.
because it's important. People like social proof. If he can do it with them, they can do it with me. So what are some of your social proof examples that you can't speak to?
Yeah, sure. I could. There's a few I'll pick to kind of to span a few different areas. One I'm particularly proud of being associated with, because they do such great work, is the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. They're one of the largest, if you could call them, it's almost wrong to call them a human services organization. That's essentially what they are, faith-based human services organization, international. We work with both the national office and for a long time I've worked with the Phoenix um, Council of the society. My wife actually worked there for a number of years. They just do such great feed, clothe, house, heal is their motto.
Wow.
It's a pretty cool motto. It's great to be uh, working. It's great to be able to think that you're doing something to help do those things for people in need.
Yeah.
So we are very close to, and there are other councils too we work with of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul across the country, and Tampa, Houston, Dayton, and I'm probably forgetting a couple of others. So we really love SVDP, what they do, what they stand for. So that's one example, kind of in the human services area. In education area, we work with a number of colleges and also like a private high schools or charter school networks. One that's based here in Phoenix that we've worked with for a very long time is Great Hearts. They are the largest brick and mortar classical charter network in the country. Really pioneers of classical education, which is probably the fastest growing mode of education in the United States today, not least because of what Great Hearts is doing and has done. So we're very proud and gratified to be associated with them, the kind of education they provide, test scores that their graduates get, the places they go off and go to college. We've worked with them in securing a lot of funding over the years. So really, they're awesome. Everybody we work with is awesome. So if you're watching this, I didn't mention you now, but I do love you. You're great. Gosh, Mike, who else should I mention? At the college level, I will just I'll point out Benedictine College in Kansas as a newer client. We've been for 2 or 3 years. We're working with them on a large capital campaign, and yeah, I guess most recently too. A lot of our clients are faith-based. A majority, not all, but a majority. Now, almost a majority of nonprofits in America are faith-based. So that doesn't necessarily make us special, but that's certainly an area where we have a particular heart and passion for. The National Eucharistic Congress, which was a big deal in the Catholic space this year and last year, is and was a client. We played I think a big role in helping that huge event that happened in Indianapolis last summer come off successfully, and to raise the funds necessary for it to come off successfully. So I know that was very gratifying for a lot of the people who work for the firm, including me. So
yeah, that's good. All right, so let's go to modern day. You've made some transitions within the company, and I've been firsthand to it since we sat in this office studio, gosh, a year and a half ago, talking about the vision of your life and what you want. So tell us what's happening right now with Jeremy, with the organization, so we can transition towards the end. We're going to tease it. What's going to happen next year with you and your influencing skills? And what I mean by that is your network, and you're doing very similar to what I do, modeling and showcasing success stories in all the things you do, podcasting, writing, and we'll get to that in a minute. But so tell us what's going on within the organization this last year as you transition.
yeah. So we last year, about as I don't have to tell you, Mike, because you were in on this conversation. Yeah. But last summer, I kind of became clear to me that the next phase of Amphil's existence, in order for us to go where we want to go and to help the clients we want to help, and to help them as well as we want to help them, we needed a new CEO. The current CEO is not going to cut it much longer, being me, of course. So, and we were really fortunate to have already running our largest division, the guy I knew, and not just me, my partners knew, was the guy to be the next CEO. His name is Chris Kudemeyer. He's fantastic. He led platoons in Afghanistan and Iraq, I think both. If you've done that, you have some leadership skills. You've been tested. He also was integral to building the fundraising program at the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, which is a very large ministry, very impressive ministry. So, and Chris has been with us for a few years. He's a partner. So Chris is the CEO now, as of January. He's doing a great job, much better than the previous CEO did, and will continue to do that going forward. People love working for him. So we're really excited about that. And as we kind of, get out of this year of transition, it free it is freeing and will free me up more to do some different things.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I'll tell you this, it's been a blessing for me because a lot of times when a company or a board or a CEO like yourself, a founder calls me, the conversation is a little different. It's like, hey, we need to get this person out of here. We got to transition them because
Yeah.
we're going to be voting them out. We want to gracefully do it. And one of my coaching philosophies, as you know, I don't coach people out. If that's why you're hiring me, I'm not going to take you as a client.
Mm.
I coach people up. So that was very clear to me when you and I first started talking about this. And I remember asking you that kind of question: Are we coaching this gentleman out? I didn't know who Chris was at the time, and
Yeah.
you're like, absolutely, this is something I'm doing on my own. And again, that's another thing I don't get very often. It's where a founder and who's passionate about the vision, original vision, and a CEO says, I'm doing this on my own accord. I'm not being pushed out. I'm not being voted out. This is where I'm looking at my heart. And by the way, I'm going to take a sabbatical, which you did. I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. And I'm going to do this for myself. And I need this new leader to emerge. So that's not normal in my world. It's usually a much more difficult situation. So for me to be able to see the organization transition smoothly from a personality perspective and a leadership perspective, it's been nice to see. It gives me hope that other companies can do it. But that is one thing that you did do, though. You were very clear with Chris and myself that you're going to be taking this leave. And there were certain rules of engagement that we all agreed to, that we would leave you alone. But I don't know too many people that take leave and do sabbaticals. Tell us a little bit about that and your belief in that and what you do in sabbatical.
You make it sound like it's this like hard and heroic thing to do, to take 6
It
weeks off
is. It
before.
is a big deal because people don't do it.
Yeah.
If I went down my coaching roster and pulled it out right now, and I went through every single one of my CEOs
Yeah.
that actually do it like you do it, you're the one. I mean, there's a couple of people who try to do it. Hey, I'm going to take 2 weeks and go to Hawaii. Great.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's a good start. But to actually take sabbatical and do something that's awesome and to reflecting on yourself, that's just not normal. So people listening to this are going to go, hey, I need to do more what Jeremy's doing. So tell us about it.
They should. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was, again, I appreciate you saying all that, but I promise you did not come from some this heroic part of my soul. It was two things. One, it seemed to me, and you backed me up on this, Mike, that if you're making a transition like this, it makes sense to be around for a while after the transition, but then to be gone for a while, just to be totally gone, so that there can be no question who's running the company, that you don't get in the way, either intentionally or unintentionally, that people don't go around the new CEO, either intentionally or unintentionally. So it just seemed like, first of all, just strategically, like if you really want to do a handoff, this is what you should do. So there was that. And the second, I mean, I just, I don't know, I think if you build a company, or, help build a company, in my case, I certainly didn't build it on my own. That's part of it. It takes something out of you, and kind of reset and refresh. And I won't use the term recenter. It's a little too new agey for me, Mike. I know that's your favorite word. I'm just kidding. But
Slightly.
that's good. It's fine. Get away, clear your head for 6 weeks. Actually, my thing was not to get on a plane for 6 weeks. That was my gift to myself, was I'm not getting on a plane. So yeah, I just did, and you couldn't contact me, as you know, unless somebody died. That was the rule, or was actively dying. Yeah,
True.
something like that was the rule.
True.
I think. And they weren't, fortunately. So and I think it worked out well. So I don't know if you're serious, other people should consider it.
They should.
But I mean,
I think everybody should. I'm always been big on retreating and going away.
Yes.
I do that every December. Right. You and I have talked about like what rituals I do for myself, whether it's spiritual or non-spiritual. When I heard you talk about it, just like, oh my goodness, I wish more people would do this.
Yeah.
And even, I mean, Jerry, when I go away in December, it's always been like a 3-day jaunt up to Sedona.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this process I go through anymore with the kids being, where they're at. It's 2 days and I'm kind of pumped because they're at the age now where I'm gonna start getting them involved with doing this as well. They're not
Yeah.
there yet, but almost there.
Right.
People thought I was crazy. They're like, you got 3 full days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, without your wife and kids to go to Sedona, 98 miles up the road to just be with yourself by yourself. That's crazy.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I didn't know it was crazy. I just didn't know any
Yeah.
different because that's what I've always done. My mentor, as you know, Tony Robbins and a lot of that crew, that was just the way we did it.
Mm.
So for you to do it for a period of time, and you're absolutely right. I know I didn't violate the rules. We had rules of engagement of
Yeah.
email, phone calls. I didn't talk to you for a long period of time. You went to
Yeah.
my luncheon in February and boom, I didn't see you for a while. So I just wish people would do that more. Just consider it. Just consider it.
It's
That's why I
great.
have to talk
It's just
about
it's a great exercise in humility, because I think most people, you find out that things don't fall apart when you're not there.
it. Yeah.
You're not as quite as crucial to the whole operation as you might have flattered yourself to thinking that you are.
Yeah, I had a CEO one time. He took away for 3 weeks to go to Europe. First time he'd ever done it in 14 years. And he came back and he says, you know what I realized, Mike? I ain't that special.
Yeah.
That was a quote. That was a quote. And that's kind of good. I'm glad that you empowered other leaders to take care of stuff while you were gone. And you know what? You ain't that special. You founded the company. God bless you. But now you've empowered other people. And that's what great leaders do. As you know, you find people that can take care of that position when you're not there. So that is absolutely pure. I wish people would do it. I was always intrigued. I never bothered you, even though I wanted to text you every week. What'd you do this week? What'd you write? What did you do? I mean, what were your rituals? I'm big on rituals.
Yeah.
All right. So let's fast forward, because I know during that time, what you've always been, dating back to some of the story you were talking about earlier, your graduate days writing, being an author and researching. So let's talk about Jeremy, the author. I mean, what is it that you love about writing? That's not for everyone's got an idea for a book. You know it. But I tell everybody, this is obviously pre-GPT. The book is not going to write itself. You've got to go find the research and go do the book. But tell us what you love about writing.
I guess a book can write itself now.
I know now it's true.
I like any writer will tell you, of course, I'm sure you agree. It's like I like having had written more than writing. Writing itself is hard. I love though the research phase prior to writing. I'm not writing on novels here where I can just you just start writing. I'm not that sort of person. I don't have that kind of imagination. So I really, really like the research phase of putting of figuring something out. What's the argument here, or what's the story? How will it best be told? What's the evidence? Getting the notes put together and the outline put together, and seeing it all kind of come together in my head, and then eventually it's starting to spill out. Like, okay, I've got to get this out now. I know what I want to. I know what I want to say. I got at least a paragraph right now, and maybe sometimes I can really string them together. So that I really like. So obviously it's not super easy. Writing can be the writing itself can be a chore, but then having had written is very satisfying. So that the process, that's what I like about the process. And then I like just understanding the field I'm working in, philanthropy, fundraising, philanthropy, whatever we want to call it, nonprofit sector, civil society more broadly. I'm very interested in that field, like how things work. I'm interested in the history of American civil society and philanthropy. I'm interested, of course, in trying to take what we've learned at Amphil, or really what we've learned from our clients. It's not some great expertise that we have, certainly not that I have, but we've learned from our clients and people who are really, really smart in the field, and bringing that together in a cohesive and compelling way, and bringing that in front of readers, I think it's gratifying and it's useful. Maybe it's valuable to somebody. So I really like that subject matter. And then kind of the offbeat side is like not having anything to do with work, because I really like telling the undiscovered or unknown stories, especially like biographical stories. So
tell us an example. When you and I first met, we both you can both tell we both like baseball. He's got one, I got one. I didn't know that when I first met him, but you have some stories that we've talked about. You've done some things that are off the beaten path. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I really just one thing worth talking about, which is I wrote a biography of uh, the greatest Negro Leagues player of all time, and completely unknown, Willie Mays before Willie Mays, and his name is Oscar Charleston. Bill James, the father of modern advanced analytics. He's referenced in Moneyball for those who've seen or read Moneyball, or don't know who Bill James is. You should. Has Charleston ranked the fifth greatest player of all time. More recently, another great baseball writer named Joe Posnanski ranked him the fourth greatest player of all time. So he was really good, and nobody knew anything about him really, or very little. There'd never been a biography of him. So, and he's from my home state of Indiana. So I had a good time researching his life and telling his story. And now I've connected with at least some members of his extended family whom I wasn't able to find before the book was published. But now we've found each other, and they're great people. So that was just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for me to surface somebody like that who deserves to be known.
But then obviously the last year you kind of came back into your path of work.
Yeah.
And that's that book over his shoulder. If you look up there, The Quest for Belonging, which I had the good fortune of reading before it even came out. He sent me the document. I got to read it, and then it came out, read it. And then I was, of course, rereading it in preparation. So I think I've had 3 turns at it. And every time I've read it, I get something different. I'm going to be talking about, I got my notes here, as you well know, that when I do my prep on these things. But tell me about that, because you get to that topic, and there's so much to unpack. You and I said we could spend 2 hours talking about the book in and of itself. So I know we got to keep it tight a little bit on that, in that regard. But that topic, what was the inspiration? Did you just wake up one day and think, I've been doing this a long time. There's psychology to motivation and why people give. There had to be a moment in time. I always call it that moment of truth, where something happened. You're like, I need to write a book on this. What was that for you, for this book?
Yeah, well, it goes back. There's a friend of the firm, friend of mine, name is Bill Schambra. He's written extensively about philanthropy and the history of American philanthropy, and brought to my attention, the firm's attention, a study that had been done a while back called "Money for Good," and it was the study's authors were interested in why people give, and really very interested in moving them toward giving in what they considered a more rational way. And Bill thought it was very what's the word here? Elitist and paternalistic of them to think that everybody gave the wrong way except the way they would have them give. And he was right. And so that study always stuck with me. And it stuck with me for another reason, which was what they discovered about the motivations for why people give, and how different they were than what many experts often said were why people give. So the experts wanted people to give, and sometimes would even say that they do give for very rational reasons, to get the highest possible return on their giving investment, so to speak, to make the most impact, to help the most people. It's very utilitarian, self-interested kind of way of giving, really a very business-like way. And that sounds all very fine, right? That all sounds great. It's just not true. It's not why most people give. It's one of the things that makes giving different than buying or investing like we do in the market. But the study had found is that most people give for one of 3 reasons. They know somebody at the organization, it's local, it shares their values. And so, okay, that's interesting. Those are good data points. And if you're a fundraiser, you're a nonprofit leader, you should know that. You should know you should know why people give, not why we think they should give, which is not very interesting. So as we reflected on that, I started doing some more research into, well, why do people do anything at all? Like, what are the sources, like the fundamental sources of human motivation? What does the research say? And discovered a book, which I have back here somewhere. It is behind me right now, called To
Flourish or Destruct?
To Flourish or Destruct, yeah.
Christian Smith, professor at University of Notre Dame, right?
Exactly. And he had done all my work for me. He had canvassed the entire psychological literature on why people give, or why people, what motivates people to do anything. And interesting to me were 2 of the 7 like fundamental motivations that he kind of distilled from the literature. Like, we're all motivated to eat. Okay, that's not very helpful.
Bodily survival. He calls it bodily survival.
Bodily survival. There you go. Yeah, you know these things. So, but two really stood out. It's like, oh, these connect to those three reasons that Money for Good found. But there was a deeper understanding. Like, I have a relationship with someone, they're local, or they share my values, and it was we are all fundamentally motivated to construct and or affirm an identity. We're motivated to know who we are. And that sounds kind of weird at first. You wouldn't think that's a fundamental human motivation, but it is.
Yeah.
And then when you really start thinking about that, you see that everywhere in our world. You'll see that everywhere in your interactions with people. You'll see it everywhere. You say, oh, that is a fundamental underlying motivation for why people do the things they do. Is to construct and affirm continually their identity, who they are. So that's one. It's like, okay, that is relevant. That's relevant. And the second thing that was clearly relevant was that we all have a fundamental motivation to belong to something larger than ourselves, to belong to a community. We're fundamentally motivated not to be isolated beings. This applies probably even to the most introverted among us, Mike, but it certainly applies to 99% of people, right? And I thought, okay, well, that's relevant too, because then you see like, oh, yeah, the most effective nonprofit organizations or really entities of any kind are good at inviting people in. They're good at giving people a sense of belonging. And then you think about it more, or I thought about it more. So yeah, and they're also giving them a sense of identity. And these things are obviously related, So you think of like the ACLU forever was so good at giving people a sense of identity and belonging. Like, I'm a card-carrying member of the ACLU. Or do you want to take the other side, the NRA? Same thing. I'm a card-carrying member of the NRA. It's like, oh, that's what really great nonprofits are doing. They're hitting these buttons. They're tapping into these fundamental sources of human motivation, of identity and belonging. And so that's how this all got started, right? So we started thinking about this as a company, and like, do we see this like in the data and in our clients and what they do? And I think the answer was yes. And then there was, well, how are they tapping into identity and belonging, or how are they serving these needs? And we thought there's really three main ways you do that. It seemed to us. One is through stories, through storytelling, through telling great stories. So I'll get into there are different kinds of stories you can do. That's what I was pausing on. But through stories, through relationships, and through experiences. Like that, those like in your three major sort of tool bags. There's lots of individual tools inside those bags for tapping into identity and belonging. So we kind of road tested that as a firm. It seemed to play out. We could tie all these different data points to it. It kind of made sense of things. So it seemed to us just to be a really fruitful framework for thinking about what the best, the most effective nonprofit leaders are doing, and really then if you think how they're understanding the psychology of giving. So,
and you know what's interesting when you postulate this in the foreword of the book, by the way, and then you bring it back up in the book later. The Christian Smith, the one of them was moral affirmation. Exercising is basically a sense of purpose, of agency. So when you think about these things, a lot of companies, it's like they don't have the script. That's why you're there, right? Because they're doing this, but they don't realize it's like they're unconsciously doing it, but they don't realize that they're actually following a framework. Is there some truth to that with Amphil? Like, you've taken this notion that, hey, you're doing something like, whether it's ACLU, NRA, whatever, pick one.
Right.
You guys are doing something that's all similar, and we can show you the science of it, which is going to make us more valuable to the next organization.
Yeah, usually they're doing some of it, but you could maybe doing more, because it's kind of a little bit accidental. Like, you haven't pulled it out and said, oh, this is what yes, you're right. When you put it that way, that's what's working for us, or we could do more of that. Because sometimes people get transactional instead, and that's sort of the opposite end here. Like, that's when you're kind of going down, I think, the wrong path. It's a short-term path sometimes. Like, political fundraising is super transactional. It's like, hey, we need money, get this person in office, they're going to do for you what you need getting done. Sometimes it can be very transactional. We're talking about more a relational point of view. And so sometimes people get fooled into going down a transactional road, or they get fooled into thinking this ROI deal is like the highest way of thinking about things. What we need to do is be able to really measure our impact and convey that to our donors and show them the ROI, show them how valuable, what the value prop is here and their investment in us. And that's all fine, but that still doesn't get to the deepest thing.
Right.
Like, nobody gives just for great ROI. That might be part of my own identity, that I'm the kind of person who really cares about ROI and I make good business decisions. So therefore you need to speak to me at that level, but you still need to know me beyond like the paper we exchange or the file. You can't just, couldn't be an anonymous transaction. Like, nobody gives that way.
Yeah.
Vanishingly few people. So even the donors, so I'm able to tell these stories a lot in the book and in real life. Like, the donors I know who talk most strongly about how they are very metrics driven and they believe in ROI. I can give you examples of their giving major gifts based on the strength of the relationships and experiences and kind of the story that they've been incorporated into by an effective nonprofit over here that speaks to their sense of who they are and gives them a sense of belonging. Like,
Yeah.
even those guys get pulled in. So that's the deepest stuff.
So one of my, and this is in my journal, by the way. I pulled this out when I first read it. So this is not like my prep notes that I printed. I pulled out this quote from all the 200 plus pages. People give, and these are quotes. Let me qualify this. People give for, quote, rational reasons to make the most important impact to their dollar. Okay, and you postulate there like, well, we'll talk about that. And you say right after that, the heart rules. Our brains simply validate the heart's decision. And I know you stand firm on that, but that is so true, because all you're talking about, like ROI, these are all rational things, a spreadsheet. But what wins out at the end of the day, right? It's going to be the heart. It's the heartstring. It's somebody you know. It's the relationship. I always get maybe scratch my head a little bit when I watch television commercials of like SPCA. They show the poor wounded dog, or they show a homeless kid in Africa, right? With the different organizations, and they're trying to show this individual or this dog to create this pain point. For only 99 cents a month, I can contribute to this. So I know there's psychology that's happening at the level of television to the average person.
Right.
Okay. But the sense of belonging and the sense of, do I really see that kid that's in the commercial, like graduate and go to college and get a degree? Maybe not. So it seems like there's a level of person out there, and I don't mean wealth or education, but it seems like some people do give for that commercial because it still runs, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the people locally here in Arizona, you and I are Phoenicians, that we're like, not so much this one, but this one, because that speaks to me. And I know people that go there. So is there a little bit of a dichotomy there between the rational and what the heartstring pull, or what wins out at the end of the day? Or is it just the heart wins out?
No, the heart wins out.
Okay.
I think that it's not entirely true. So the strong position on this, the David Hume position, is that the brain merely validates what the heart decides, right? And I'm not that strong. I think the brain can fight back against the heart, but typically we don't. Unless so unless it violates some other deep sense of who we are, right?
Yeah.
What our heart is leading us to. So, yeah, I mean, it is the short way of saying a lot of what we're saying here is that many nonprofit leaders and fundraisers want to just make the mistake of talking too much to the head, to the brain, instead of talking first to the heart. Move the heart, then work on the brain to get it to validate where you've already led the heart, and you're going to be good to go. And that's okay. That's okay. That's how we're made as human beings. Like, we don't have to. There's a movement I talk about at length in the book called effective altruism that just hates all this. It hates it. And I think they're just completely in the end of the day, very inhumane, actually, with the recommendations that lead us toward. That's how we're made. There's an order of charity. It starts at home. It starts with those closest to us in our communities, radiates out from there. And so, work to have your heart kind of aligned with that order of charity, and respond to the opportunities that are put in front of you. That's my opportunity. This is my preaching to givers now. For fundraisers, show how you fit into that order, your organization. There's a good, really good thinker on fundraising and philanthropy named Russell James. He's at Texas Tech. If people want to follow him on LinkedIn, I highly recommend it. He shares tons of free resources all the time. His framework for fundraising is so good. This is identity, challenge, victory. And it was when I discovered it, well after I'd come up with my little theory, I was like, oh, good. Somebody else is using this word identity in a key way. So maybe I'm totally wrong. Identity, remind people who they are. Find out who they are, and then remind them who they are. Issue a challenge that allows them to affirm that identity or enhance that identity, is what Russell James would say. And then show them a path to victory, show them a path to overcoming that challenge and achieving victory. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's great. You're making everybody the hero of a story in that way.
It's so true.
Also how that's framed like a story.
That's
that has
so
identity powerful. as its foundation.
That's so powerful, man. You know, it's funny because it occurred to me as you're saying that. And by the way, I didn't know you were going to riff that. I do a lot of sales training, as you know. And in sales training, there's a framework. You have to ask powerful questions. You have to, different verbs, uncover the wound, solve the solution, all that stuff, whatever vernacular or studies you read. But if you break it down at the end of the sales decision, a watch, a car, this microphone I bought, right after COVID, right? Because I was doing more podcasting. It's all about your identity. And is this congruent with me? Does this make me look like how I want to be seen when I'm driving this car? When I'm on this microphone today with listeners, is this the kind of microphone that represents Mike Lindstrom?
We make a lot of decisions, Mike. We don't think about this much. It's implicit. But a lot of our decisions are like, is that the kind of thing that someone like me would do?
Bingo.
Or is that the kind of thing that somebody like who I want to be would do?
Yeah.
It's even better.
That's good. So I got to bring this up, and just a couple more points on the book before we get to the next topic. So I love in the beginning, you talk about the concept of DIRT. DART was original, right? Donor response theory. And you guys threw the I in there and made it DIRT. Yeah. And I want you to talk about DIRT for 1 second, but you go through the 5 points. And to me, I see it's like a staircase. You have what the charitable organizations, like what essentially are the 4 requests. It's save us, like we're going down. That's the bottom level. Like, holy moly, we need help. Give us money. Then you have lend a hand, which is we're not on life support. We're not going down, but we really could use some help. Then you have invest in our work. We're an efficient and cost-effective entity pursuing this need, and it's your self-interest to send us money. And then this higher level, which is what I strive for with all my nonprofits, and you and I have talked about mine, ambassadors, is be a part of a community or movement. That's like everyone's goal. And I hate to say the word, but the base word of culture is cult, right? Yeah. You want to build common language, common belief. Look, Apple's a cult, Google's a cult in a playful sense, right? You're proud of the logo, you're proud of the jersey, you're proud of the nonprofit. It's no different. I don't care what nonprofit is. When you're excited to put on that t-shirt after you went on that run and that 10K, and walk around community because you're part of that. That's the biggest piece to get to. But how many entities really get there? Is that a pie in the sky aspiration for a nonprofit? Or is that still something we always have to chase and be happy that maybe the other
you're chasing it. I think you're always chasing it, right? I mean, you're always chasing it to do it as better than you are today. It's not pie in the sky, though. I see a lot of nonprofits get close to that 4th level. But you have to be, and some just intuit it. They intuit that this is how we should invite people along into this community and along the journey together, right? But others, you had to help flip the light switch on for them, because you start like, I have a goal, I need money to achieve. It's for other people. I have a goal, I need money to achieve that goal. You have some money. Well, you give me money so I can achieve this goal. That's the natural way we often think about it. That's how I would have thought about it originally, right? But that's not compelling to anybody. Instead, it's like, here's a need. I have a heart for this need. Would you come alongside me? Would you join me? And by the way, several thousand others, and together we can help these people over here. We can meet this need. We can make this community better or whatever. Like it's just flipping. I'm not looking at you and asking you. I'm like inviting you to stand alongside me and march together towards something.
Yeah.
It's just it's a cognitive flip that once it happens, and once you kind of get in that habit, like then you can push everything, can kind of be reorganized and reframed in your organization along those lines.
Yeah.
but it's hard because we're naturally egotistic beings and we put the focus on ourselves.
Yeah.
And
Well,
even when we're not doing it for ourselves, we still put the focus on ourselves. Look what we did, like we talk about in the book. Like the we pronoun should be you and the donor together, not you and your colleagues at the organization.
yeah.
That's the wrong we.
Yeah, the one thing that really hit me on the emotional piece, like the emotional heartstrings, is, and there was an example. There's several examples in the book, but I make up, like, if I'm walking down the street in Phoenix and I see somebody who's homeless and I can give them $20,
Yeah.
I can make a direct impact. Do I know where that $20 goes? But there's an immediate gratification of maybe watching their face. You were talking about this example of the Buffett family. It was Howard Buffett,
Yeah.
and going to, I believe it was Africa, and meeting this family and walking by someone he could no doubt influence, like this couple, this family,
Mhm.
this mother and her child, but him
Mhm.
having to walk away and say, that was a hard lesson to learn, because at the end of the day, it's really about teaching, and like teaching somebody how to fish. Like, you can solve that problem right then. Buffett could reach in his left
Mhm.
pocket and fix that solution right there,
Mhm.
but have to walk by that emotionally and say, no, there's a greater problem here. It's the water in the village.
Mhm.
It's the education in the community. I struggle with that personally,
Yeah.
because I mean,
Well,
I'm just being real, man.
everybody should
I'm
struggle
not
with
a
that.
fan of giving to
Yeah.
the homeless
Right.
guy on the street. If I've ever done it, I always
Mhm.
have a preface, like, I'm paying you for your time, or they
Yeah.
give me a lesson. Maybe
Yeah.
it's my own weirdness or my own,
Yeah.
checkbox. But how, people struggle with that, I think, a little bit.
Yeah. Well, now we're getting into this, kind of the ethics or even spirituality of giving. I think the answer here, the only right answer is a both and, right? The only right answer here is a both and. Um, Clearly, it is worthwhile and good, and noble to search to attack a problem at its root causes, to try to get at the roots, fix it, right?
Mhm.
That's a great thing. That's how we tend to think as Americans generally anyway, right? We think things can be fixed and that we should spend our time and resources trying to fix them. At the same time, we're called to help those in need who are in front of us right now. And just because it might take a while to fix things at the root, or even if we can't, fix a dependency issue right away, we have to feed those who are hungry. We have to clothe those who are naked. We have to visit those who are in prison. We have to do all those things. There's nothing about that statement from, in this case, scripture, that says, like, but make sure you don't create dependency along the way. And actually, if you could spend more time trying to fix the issues that led to those situations, that'd be better. There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
Nothing like that in scripture.
Yeah.
And I think, so I think the answer here is a both and. There's a certain amount of brokenness in the world. And there is a certain kind of amount of pride sometimes in thinking we can fix everything that leads to that brokenness. And sometimes all we can do is tend to the brokenness as it is and enter into it, to some extent ourselves, and do a little suffering with. And that's what a Howard Buffett or a Bill Gates, the other example I use in the book, are never going to know. But if you read the deepest stuff about givers, now we're like not talking about fundraising anymore, we're talking about giving. The more you, and by the way, the finger pointed right at me, okay, so not pointing at other people, can do some suffering with, and not just trying to fix problems by giving money to the organizations that are working at the root causes. That you're going to get way more out of that spiritually as a person, than if you stay totally distant and not involved. I don't know if that makes sense.
100%. I went last week. So we have a mutual friend, School Connect, who
Yeah.
partners with ambassadors, and she does events every year, Tracy Beal, to help entrepreneurs go out and meet teachers and superintendents to find out what their needs are. So they were like meetups. So I went to one 2 weeks ago, and I met a bunch of principals and people all over the valley. And one in particular reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you come visit my middle school over on the west side?" And I said, "I'd love to." And I haven't done that for a long time. I mean, I do it through the spirit
Yeah.
of ambassadors, but
Right.
as an entrepreneur, I hadn't done that in a while.
Right.
And my goodness, I walk on, seventh and eighth graders, 600 kids, and I got to walk around for 2 hours and see what was the reality of their lives, and let this principal tell me about what's going on. I mean, I walked out of there and I thought,
Great.
how can I help this school right?
Right.
It's not how can I donate money to the district or
Yeah.
go back to Ambassadors Compassion and say, hey, let's do this thing for the whole city, which I'm still going to want to do. I
Right.
felt more emotionally. I was emotional. I'm not going to lie, Jeremy. I came
Yeah.
home that day. Even my kids were like,
Yeah.
man, what happened at the school? I said, guys, you just I'm going to take you back there, by the way. That's going to be one of the things you need to see. And
Yeah.
you need to understand that this is happening all over the world. This isn't happening just, in
Yeah.
a certain part of town or whatever, but having that suffer with it and to be able to understand it and feel more understanding, I guess, of what it would be. So
Mhm.
that's what I mean about, the person walking down the street who's homeless versus, somebody
Yeah.
who's struggling and the greater good. I think everybody wants to contribute in their own way. Some people it's the pocketbook, somebody it's their time because they don't have the pocketbook. But I
Right.
think you're right. I think you have to take care of the immediate need first, but you also have to think about the greater good.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to start wrapping up here. I want to go down the home stretch about, dovetail this into like 2004, 25, kind of the state of nonprofits. I mean, everything's social media. I've been to many events that you and I are part of where they give you a card and you're scanning your phone and, you're
Mhm.
walking out of a breakfast and it's so distant. It's like, those days of going to the school like I did the other day is much different emotional impact on me
Yeah.
than scanning my phone and giving $250 or $50 to a breakfast. I mean, what's the state of the union for people out there in the world that want to not just give, but nonprofits? I mean, you're seeing this stuff firsthand. Any advice?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, the need is growing in almost every area. The biggest thing that I think um, the nonprofit sort of sector is only really barely starting to really get its arms around how to really attack is this crisis of loneliness, isolation, anxiety, depression that we are in the middle of. It's the numbers are insane, especially for young people, especially for young women. They're just off the charts bad. But even like suicides among middle-aged men, up drug overdoses. Like look at almost all the data from kind of a social health standpoint is shockingly bad. So the need that many of our nonprofit organizations are addressing, not even just those in the human services area, but education, faith-based ones, they all have a piece of this, is massive. At the same time, and I'm sorry, this is not the good news portion of the talk here, Mike. Like the charitable and real dollars, charitable giving is down 10% in the last 2 years. We'll see how 2024 comes in, but from 21 to 23, it dipped by 10.3% in real inflation adjusted dollars. That's not great. The number of individual givers, as far as we can tell, this doesn't necessarily count all the GoFundMe type stuff, and it certainly doesn't count the kind of informal giving like people do, just neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend, family member to family member. But all in all, number of individual givers is also decreasing. So some things are not so great. More and more of nonprofits philanthropic revenue is coming from foundations and from the high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals. So that's just sort of the reality of the game that we're in right now. The other kind of trend that's a negative trend from a nonprofit standpoint, from a philanthropy standpoint, is disaffiliation from churches and religion. That's been the big story in the last generation, really. And so much giving historically has been done through churches and synagogues, through faith-based institutions. So much of the delivery of services has happened from those, from churches and faith-based institutions, often supported by churches. That's a real potential crisis going forward. It certainly is probably what's behind some of this dip in giving that we're seeing. So that's kind of what's going on. If we're thinking like sector wide, then there are things. Yes, QR codes are being used much more for fundraising, online mode, online giving. Still not a huge piece of the pie when you look at the overall revenue, but certainly it's only going to grow. At the end of the day, though, most philanthropic revenue at nonprofit organizations comes from gifts that come from individuals with whom the organization built a strong relationship. And that's a legacy gift after they pass away, or sometimes before they pass away, kind of planned gift, or just major giving while they're alive. That's still the heart of it. You're looking at 70-80% often of budgets are coming from that kind of giving. And that will continue to be the case for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have noticed that. I didn't know the numbers the way you gave them, but it's definitely seemed a little bit more challenging. The economy. I mean, the people pay attention to what they're paying at the pump, and you
Yeah.
look at that extra little bit of money that you might give that you wouldn't even think twice about. You know, I always hope during the holiday season, it doesn't matter right or left politics, that this time of year is when people kind of find it, what time of Thanksgiving. I'm sure you probably could speak to that. But probably as a spike. Not just because it's end of year and you need, tax deductions, but people find in their heart to want to give a little bit more. So the timing of this is really good. So I want to end with this, because I know that this is a little bit of a flip the script. I get to interview you, which is so cool. Thank you so much for doing this with me. But I know that that's the other way around. Usually you're bringing on authors, guests, nonprofit CEOs, leaders, influencers in the community, not social influencers in the new sense of the world, but actually people who are making an impact in your world. So can you give us a tease or a forecast of what we're going to see for 2025 from Jeremy Beer? Because you're no longer in this CEO role. Obviously you're a founder, you maybe advise the company, right? But you're going into this next chapter of what you want to be doing, not just to represent the company as an ambassador, but what you want to do. Give us a little tease.
Well, we're going to reboot. I've had a podcast called Givers, Doers, and Thinkers for a couple of years, maybe more than a couple of years at this point. And we're rebooting that. It's been on hiatus this year. We're rebooting it next year. And through really the next 18 months, we're going to have 3 10-episode seasons, one of Givers, one of Doers, and one of Thinkers. And the overall theme is going to be the lead up to July 4th, 2026. What happens July 4th, 2026, Mike?
Gosh, that's a trick. Well, I didn't know.
This is the problem. It's America's 250th birthday.
Oh my gosh, I should have known that. I knew that was the theme, but I didn't connect the dots.
That's all right. That's okay. Most people aren't thinking that way though, and it's kind of amazing. So we're gonna jump into that because it's an important day, and so the overall theme is going to be America at 250, and so the thinkers are going to talk about the sort of tradition of private giving and philanthropy and civil society and voluntary associations that have made America so robust. It's civil society so robust and dynamic, and the envy of the world, frankly. How did that come about, and where is it going? Then we'll be talking to givers who are doing something really interesting and innovative with their giving to support civil society. And then the same with doers. Talk to nonprofit leaders who are doing something fascinating and really cool to help strengthen civil society in some way. So all of that kind of America at 250 kind of overall theme. So that's what's coming in the next 18 months.
Well, it's funny because I knew the theme, but as soon as you said the date, I didn't connect the dots. So I'm probably like most people, honestly, because it's not 2025 we'll be talking about it because a year out. So the fact that you're already in 2024 talking about this educates people. You know how the media will glom onto it when we're like 12 months out, 6 months out, and it'll be a big press, hoorah. But the fact that you can get out there earlier than probably, frankly, anybody I know that's talking about this in November, December.
Right around the corner. It's only a year and a half away.
I know. That's such an awesome thing. All right. So I always end every one of my interviews with takeaway. I call it the final leader takeaway. Do you have anything? It could be a piece of advice. It could be a book, a podcast, a quote, piece of advice that's shaped who you are, but it's your one final leader takeaway to everybody that's listening out there. What would you say?
Is it about the theme of this book?
Whatever you want. No, it's whatever you want.
No, it could be anything? Okay, I got one thing. It has nothing to do with this, but I do have one thing. Well, it's a piece of advice that somebody once gave me. It stuck with me, and it's really true. And I sometimes say this to young people. Always go to the funeral. Always go to the funeral. If it's in your mind, like, should I go to this or not? Go to the funeral.
Wow.
It's worth, that's somebody told me that once, and it's totally true. And you never feel good skipping somebody's funeral. If you ever remotely think that you should have been there, go. And it's good for you.
Man, oh gosh.
There you go. I always come up with these kind of uplifting things.
These are good. No, man, you hit me in the heart because this last year I was unable to make friends. It was a friend of a friend, but somebody I've known for a while, and they lived a good life. It was kind of a sudden thing. I didn't make it, and I beat myself up thinking I should have gone to that. And it was a business thing. But right when you said it, it made me think of my friend, because you're right. You know as well as I do, not that you're keeping track, but you know who showed up to your dad's funeral, your mom's funeral, your
Yeah.
grandparents' funeral.
No,
Not that
it's right.
that's why you go. Not
And it
that's why
means
you go.
no, but it means so much. You know that. Understand
It does. It has such an emotional impact on the, and I know this too. My sister passed away years ago at 50 unexpectedly, and I remember every single person that showed up.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're saying. That's not what I expected you to say. So thank you. But I've gotten everything. I got
We
the
said this is unscripted, so I
I
don't.
love so some of my takeaways, um, GTT, go to things. Just go to things.
Go to things. Yeah,
Right?
that's a
Go
good
to
one.
things. Networking, right? GTT, go to things. The heart's gonna win. I got that. The fuzziest of the thesis. I remember you said that word. You can go back and rewatch this. When you were talking about the vision of the company, it was the
Yeah.
fuzziest of a thesis of what it was going to be, whether it was the book, the company, and when you built it. That's just
Yeah.
a term I've heard you use before in your own way. But a lot of times that's where a vision starts. It's not clear, it's not sure, but you have this fuzzy something of what you want your thesis to be, whether it's a book you want to write or a passion you want to do. And that's a takeaway I got from you today. So I just want to say thanks. I really appreciate your time. I know your time is valuable, and I hope that we can get the story out there. I will with my people. Hopefully you do too. And that's one thing that, I had to get over the hump a little bit, because I wasn't going to get you here to brag. I wanted to get here and extract knowledge from you, because you and I don't like that platform to sit here and come up and talk about two guys that have done great things. It's not the point. It's to be able to share the people that we've worked with, the missions that we're a part of. And I hope that people take you up on the readings and the things you have. Go get your book, The Quest for Belonging, powerful stuff. So thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you as well.
Absolutely.
All right. I think we did it.
I think it was good, man.
Hey, I'm going to stop this.